Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for this WBCSD webinar on how COVID-19 will change the way we use space. My name is Roland Hunziker, and I will be your host for today. And I'm very pleased to have with me a very distinguished panel of speakers that we will introduce shortly. For those of you who may not be so familiar with WBCSD, we are a global member-led organization with about 200 companies in our membership. Our vision is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable world. We operate with 6 priority programs where with our membership, we are working on collaborative solutions for sustainability. On circular economy, cities and mobility, climate and energy, food and nature, people, as well as redefining value. Today's webinar is about the built environment, and it is a very important topic as it is the built environment that is responsible for about 40% of global emissions, as well as more than half of all the resources we consume on this planet. So the topic of today is important as in WBCSD we have a program together with our members on how do we drive decarbonization and circularity in the built environment, among other important sustainability measures. And the discussion is about how this current pandemic crisis may or may not affect the way we are using space, because it is the way we use space and the way we build and for what purposes we build, that is the fundamental driver for everything that happens in the built environment. I will just introduce a few housekeeping issues. First of all, this session is being recorded. When you join, there is a little button where we may ask you to click on allowing that to happen. All participants are muted, and we will make the slides as well as a short summary and the recording available. Now you can use 2 ways of asking some questions to our panelists. You can use the chat function and we will monitor that throughout the call, and you can also raise your hand with the little button that you see. WBCSD abides with strict antitrust rules, so we remind all our participants in all our meetings, face-to-face and online, to avoid any discussion on the topics. So I'm very, very pleased now to introduce to you my colleague, Christiana, who will moderate the session, and she will introduce one by one our distinguished panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roland. So we have a funny setting, so we actually have to move seats. We are in the office. All right, so good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar from me as well. I have the privilege this morning for me to moderate this panel, and I would like to introduce the panelists today. I'm very excited and keen in listening from them, from the panelists, from the speakers, but also from you, from the audience, how you're currently using your space, what are the plans for the future, and what does it mean for sustainability? So, dear speakers, I will name you one by one so that you can introduce briefly yourself. So I'll start from Eke.
Well, good morning. I'm Eke Schins. I'm a sector leader education at Arcadis, and I'm currently involved in all the issues that are surrounding the other use of space of buildings and space within all the areas within Arcadis.
Thank you, Eke. Antoine?
Yes, good morning. I'm Antoine Mabilon. I work for BNP Paribas Real Estate, and I'm in charge of developing turnkey projects in France and Western Europe for large tenants and clients of the group.
Thank you, Antoine. Pascal?
Hi, I'm Pascal Smet. I'm now responsible for urbanism, heritage, and the international relations of Brussels. Before, I did a lot on mobility and public works in the Brussels government, and I'm still a member of the Brussels government, but now on urbanism.
Thank you, Pascal. Vitali.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Vitali Becker. I'm based in Geneva. I'm heading the Department of Investment Advisory for Western part of Switzerland at Imoveris. Imoveris makes part of Swiss Prime Site Group, one of the largest investor in Switzerland.
Thank you, Vitali. Magali.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Magali Anderson. I work for LafargeHolcim. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer, part of the Executive Committee. I was named in that position 8 months ago, so super exciting time to be in that job.
Thank you, Magali. Sunita.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I am based out of India. I head sustainability for Mahindra Life Spaces. With our head office in Bombay, we are into 4 specific verticals: affordable housing, residential housing, which is mid and premium sector. We are into integrated cities as well as industrial clusters.
Thank you, Sunita. So let's get started. I will stop sharing the screen so that we can have a nice, broad and wide view of all these speakers. So if those who are not speaking can turn off their camera, that would be excellent, so that I can actually have a full view of the speakers and of the panelists. Great, thank you. So COVID-19 and the lockdowns that we have recently experienced have left almost all our offices and our street empty, forcing governments and business leaders to rethink strategically the way they're currently using space and urban planning. COVID-19 has been terrible, has disrupted our life. It's been terrible for the economy, caused a lot of death, but there has also been some positive elements. And the more, I would say, the one that we all see is the reduction of pollution and the increase of air quality and reduction of traffic. So now that things are slowly getting back to normal, the question is, how can we make these positive elements permanent? Now, both governments and business leaders have to ensure the health of their employees and their citizens while we are slowly getting back to this new normal. So my first question is for Sunita. So Sunita, if you can turn your camera on and your mic on. Thanks. So how are you currently using your space? How is Mahindra ensuring this return to the new normal?
So basically a lot of work has been put together by the admin team and the HR team to ensure that we are following various protocols. So first, put the protocols in place, especially since construction sector work resumption was, our government has actually given the go-ahead that construction activities can start. And for that, we had to put several standard operating procedures in place to ensure whoever is coming into the premises gets checked and follows various health protocols, and SOPs have been made for ensuring the space that we are utilizing for even sitting for the offices that we are currently operates at a 33%, which is as per the government norms. For our construction site, we are still facing challenges with getting the laborers back, and as that picks up, we have put in protocols in place so that their temperature is checked right at the beginning. Sanitization kiosks are provided at various locations, and there are guidelines provided everywhere which are visual in form, which inform in various languages that what you need to do and what you shouldn't be doing. As for main offices reopening, it is still because we are based out of Bombay, and Bombay is still very much under the COVID siege. We have still not opened our Mumbai offices, but in Chennai, in Jaipur, Delhi, Nagpur, some of these places, our work already has started. People are coming back to work.
So some are getting back, some other are still working from home, and a strong
Yes.
yes
Yes.
So Vitali, what is it like in Switzerland? We also have lived around, but measure well quite relaxed here. So what do we see here in Switzerland? How are we currently using our space?
Well, Switzerland, thank you for the question. Switzerland is a small country, as you know, almost 8.5 million citizens. We had all over Switzerland over 31,000 cases. Less than 2,000 people died from this. So the Swiss government has put in place a very structured program, which was very helpful in dealing with this pandemic, because it is probably one of the countries in Europe, while being in the middle of Europe, that has suffered the less from this pandemic. So this was very well managed with the protocols and administrative ordinances, and the population has followed all the rules. On the federal level, it was well managed, and there was some possibility to act also on the cantonal level. We have 26 cantons in Switzerland. So altogether, it was a success of management, of crisis management, let's say it this way.
And are people going back to work? We are
yes.
in the office, but we're just, I think we're 10 on an office of 20 for 100 people.
Yes, indeed. From 11th of March, people started to delocked, to come to work, but it was in a very progressive manner. The first, so basically it is coming back to normal, but in a progressive way. Nowadays, back a month ago, we were allowed to be 5 in the office if, let's say, we respect the distance and the hygiene, of everybody. So we were asked not to take public transport during rush hours and so on. So there are lots of rules to respect, and it's common sense. Nowadays, things are getting back to normal, but from what I hear, large corporations, banks, and international companies still manage this in a very, let's say, structured manner. So there are still many people home working.
Working from home, yeah. And Pascal, so from the city of Brussels, from where you sit, how are you ensuring that people start to go out again and use the public buildings and public spaces again?
First of all, in Brussels, we were never confined completely. That means that even at the peak of we could go outside, walk alone, not in groups, of course. So there was always a difference. But today, in Brussels, more and more, the new normal looks like the old normal. So the general rule is that you can go out, you can go to shops, you can go to bars, to restaurants, but you have to keep the distance of 1.5 meters. If you are in public transport, then masks are mandatory. In other places where a lot of people would gather, it's highly recommended, but the highly recommended is being interpreted by the people as not necessarily. And if you would have been in Brussels the last days, then you would have seen that all the terraces, all the squares, all the places, they are full of people. People are not keeping the distance. We had in the city this weekend at 2 places kind of mass gathering, spontaneous. The bars are open till 1 o'clock at night, and people have to go out. Then they have to go home immediately. But what happened is they all gathered on a square and started to party on their own. And so that was kind of a bit of scandal. It's the same in France. You see in many places where just people to start to kiss again. You know, if you walk, people want to shake your hands, they want to kiss, you nearly have to hit them to say, you cannot do that. It's still a problem. So, you know, we try to say that rule. In the working environment, most people will still work home. Telework is the norm still, but people can go to the office. All functions, so not only the essential one, also the non-essential, they can go to the office. Most companies will let people come 1 day a week or something like that together. But then, of course, once again, with the general rule of the distance, 1.5 meters, and the mask, if your meeting room or your office room cannot be aired. You know, it's all a question, do you get fresh air in the room, yes or no? That makes a big difference. For the events in the open air, it's 200 people are now allowed in open air from the 1st of July. Probably they will increase it to 500. We might be obliged from tomorrow on or this weekend on to wear masks in the shops, in places where people gather, because there is an issue that people come too close to each other now, that they're no longer keeping the bubbles, no longer respecting the distance. And so the rule of mask will probably be generalized. There's a big debate now going on between the medical people that are advising the government, the central federal government, and the government ministers who have to take that decision. But our numbers are okay. During the whole crisis, we had a lot of people dead, nearly 10,000 people, of which half of them are mainly in the elderly care housing system. That's a big issue coming up. Do we put people in the elderly houses, because most of our deaths wasn't there? But at the same time, our hospitals could always cope with the situation. I think we had something like 50% occupation rate in the intensive care unit, so there was never a real overwhelming of the hospital system. But on the other hand, the people in the care and the elderly care homes, they suffered a lot. Thank you.
Pascal, yes, well, indeed, I think the situation is still very fluid. And Sunita, what about private space? Because we've been working from home. We probably have never spent so much time at home, actually. So have this spurred new desires in terms of private space? What do you see?
Absolutely. And we are, so basically for the real estate sector, I think this is a very exciting time, because home becomes important, very important. And all those people who have never owned their own homes are now wanting to own a home. And there are people throughout this period who are earning money and have, the means to buy a home, but were deferring it. And in India, you tend to buy smaller homes and make do with it, because you're out working and you are just barely home for, your nighttime rest and probably dinner. And therefore, the thought of how the internal indoor spaces should be, and how we should be designing our homes indoors, that idea has changed, because now in the home, you really need to put in the workspaces. You need to have your children's laptops, your husband, all the spouses working, the children are attending school. So the requirement for, workspaces within the home and work from home has now become crystallized. It has become a reality. For Indians, it was never the case, except for some sectors in IT or startups. In the startup space, this is very common that people work from home. But normally it is not the case. So this has crystallized, and that it has hit Indians in a big way, that now that we have to work from home, how should my home be? And people are aching for connecting with nature from the confines of home. So we were not allowed to even go out. So how do you then connect with nature? So balconies become important, because you need your vitamin D if you're not going down for a walk. You need to have a edible garden, or some area where you can feel fresh, or even take a short walk, multiple rounds, and natural light and ventilation within homes becomes very, very important. So the way the home is being thought of has actually changed. There is, I believe, a requirement where people will be now looking at more than 2 bedrooms. Normally 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom is a middle class norm in India. Now people are saying, no, we probably could look at a 3 bedroom home or a 4 bedroom home where we can look at workspaces also defined. So home definitely assumes prime importance, and people want to make it better. It has to be well ventilated, natural lighting, and connected with nature. I think that becomes very important. And the air flow within the home is also very important. And people have some sort of apprehension with air conditioning also, given that, under such conditions, many doctors have said maybe air conditioners should be avoided. So
thanks, Anita. Thanks for sharing how people are now looking at their private space. So now I have a question for Eke. Because of this increase to working from home, we're seeing what was even unimaginable before, and it's actually happening. Like I think that Gartner, which is a big ICT company, said that now 60% of the population is working from home, while it was roughly 20% before. So what should we say to business leaders? I know that the future, it's hard to predict, but will we need more space in the future or less space, more adaptable office spaces? So what is your view on this?
Well, I think you see companies react pretty differently to all the challenges that they're meeting now. There are big companies telling their people to stay at home and work at home, because then they can decide about their offices if they need more space or less. And some big companies even decide never to work at the office anymore and leave their people at home. So they only use the offices as meeting spaces, which means that they will use only less offices in the future. And there are companies that are still doubting about how they will develop their offices in the future. I think if you cross a line, you will see that a lot of companies will use their offices in the future as offices for meeting places. So they will eventually will use less space and really think about their offices in the future as a place where people and colleagues will meet for special reasons and do their work at home. Which means that you really have to look at the environment around the working place, like Sunita used to say, and you really have to look at a really livable environment around the working places and see if you can manage, even within your cities, to look at a very livable space. So we'll give some challenges for the offices, but also for the cities to look at their areas around. Make it more greener, more livable for people to live around.
Thanks, Eke. And Antoine, from where you sit at BNP Paribas, what do you see? Are companies renegotiating contracts? Are they asking for a reduction of the price? At the end, many of the offices are empty, so companies are paying a rent for a space that it's not used. So what is your view on this?
Well, just to bounce back on what Eke was saying, a famous architect of the name of Bjarke Ingels from the big group was saying, the office tomorrow should be like schools in Scandinavia, where you learn from home and all your concentrating time is done at home, and you go to the office or to school to ask questions, participate, and interact in order to grow on what you learned at home. And I think Eke's analysis is very to the point there. Are companies renegotiating? I expected that question a bit later, Christiana, but yes, they are. There's more of a wait and see attitude right now to what tenant requests can be and to what they can want in the future, because in fact, and we had this discussion with Pascal, the new norms are not there yet. So they don't really know exactly what to renegotiate, but certainly purchasers are taking a look at the overall economy and saying, indeed, we need to reprice. But tenants who in fact are only raison d'être. The tenant in my industry is the client is king, and the tenant is a sum of employees. So the employees of these companies we work for are the king in our market, and we need to make sure that what we're providing to them is best in class, of course, but we need to understand what best in class is. And so the questions are more around what is the workspace we want in the future with tenants, and indeed around price renegotiations with investors. But investors in a way are just down the line for us. The client, the first client and our raison d'être is the tenant and the employee. And I mean, these office buildings that we build, they need to be a service which the employer provides to the employee. So they need to be a tool of quality, not just a place to keep an eye on your employees. And so this is where we need to provide the most efficient workspace, keeping in mind what regulations can be in the future indeed, but without having a crystal ball for it. So we'll invest. Renegotiations are going to be around quality with tenants, perhaps not only price and also quality with investors, but we must invest in technologies which will make our product different within what we will be calling the new normal later on. So we're going to be talking about air quality for sure, technology for work from home or work as you go when you pop by the office, hygiene for sure, but that's a very simple one, and mobility measures that employers will be giving to employees. These often fall back onto the developer who's providing a turnkey project. So we're looking very closely at what might be renegotiated in terms of price, but also in terms of quality and product.
Thank you, Antoine. So I understand that probably the future of workspace will be to gather together, and I'm pretty sure that we will find a vaccine or a cure for COVID, and that we will definitely get back together. And I think it is a pleasure, and it is a pleasure for me to be with my boss Roland, and also meeting some other colleagues here in the office. So indeed, it also increases creativity. So it is nice to be back, but we will be back certainly differently. But Magali, what is the vaccine, or even better, what is the cure that we need to find for another pressing challenge that we see coming, which is climate change? Is the construction industry ready to face this challenge, to decarbonize and increase the circularity? So what is your view on this?
So before I answer that difficult and tricky question, let me talk about my own confinement and just tell you, trying to work on a sustainability strategy by e-virtual meeting is very complicated. And this is when I was allowed to go back to the office 1 month ago, I realized how precious it was to have those small talk in the office. To Antoine's point, a mix of both is good. Too much of each is maybe not the right thing. But let me answer your question. So I will answer it first from construction material producer, as LafargeHolcim is, as we do cement and concrete. We are working on it, and we are not working on it today. We've been working on it for 30 years. I mean, we have, if you look at our CO2 emission per, in our business, we look at it per ton of cementitious, we have reduced it by 27% in the last 30 years. So there's been a lot of work. And that work continues. I mean, I could give you numbers, 50% of our R&D resources, 40% of our patents are all into low carbon solutions. So I think there's a huge, huge work done by the construction industry to become less CO2, more circular. We now do cement and concrete that use a lot of recycled material. Last month we sold our first zero neutral CO2 concrete in Germany. So lots of effort is made, I think, by each player. But I think what today is certainly missing, and what will be the next change, is if all the people who are around the table today, who are with me on the panel, if we all get together and make it happen. So, you know, we have to make it happen in the way we design the buildings. So you want to, we've done studies with designers where something as simple as making sure you use the right concrete for the right usage sounds maybe a bit basic, but we sometimes tend to take one concrete and use it for every application. Just doing that, just redesigning, being more performant, you know, looking at performance more than volumes, etc., we can save in the region of double digits just on a standard building. And we have made that exercise with developers. So I think it's really, I truly believe the construction industry is ready. We need some push, or we need some help, and we'll talk about it a bit later when it comes to legal environment, etc. But more than that, I think we all need to work together, and this is really what will bring the super step change.
And Magali, Antoine said, you know, renegotiation can happen on the quality of the building. So for sure, well, you not change the quality of the concrete or, you know, other structural details, but yeah. Do you think that that this crisis will increase demand on low carbon materials and circular material?
I truly hope so. I mean, I truly hope so, because I truly hope that COVID was so tragic and such a tragic eye-opener of what climate change can bring. So I just hope that people won't go back to their day-to-day too quickly. I mean, I've seen it. I'm now back to my day-to-day since 1.5 months, and I'm kind of I forget, you know, you were showing us with your mask earlier, I kind of forget that I ever wore a mask. So I think the danger is that we go back there. And I think our job, people in sustainability, policymakers, etc., is to make sure we don't forget it, because it will certainly, as many experts say, come back. So, you know, what I like to say is we are fighting that COVID wave, and it's a tragic wave, but the tsunami of the climate is right behind. And we can't just go back to normal and forget it. So I'm part of the people, and LafargeHolcim is part of the companies who are clearly pushing for that. Am I in position to say for sure it will happen? No, I'm not. I'm just very hopeful.
So I have a question in the chat from Raul. Hi, Raul from Acciona. So he says, given the crisis and the sensitivity to price, are the efforts to reduce the carbon intensity of materials, concrete, still sustainable? This question, I think it's for both Magali and Sunita.
Yeah, so as I have the floor, I will answer first, and then Sunita can jump in, of course, right after. Yes, of course. I mean, if you look at the EU Green Deal, if you look at the trillion that Europe wants to put, it's not going to slow down now. Is it going to temporarily slow down for 1 or 2 years? Because in our industry, low carbon comes with high investment. There's no question about it. You know, you can't disconnect both. Low carbon comes through technology and innovation, and that costs money. Now, it doesn't mean we can't absorb it. It doesn't mean there are not things we can do, and that's why I was talking about design of buildings to make it low carbon at low cost. And there's many levers we have in it, but it still requires, for example, when we replace fossil fuels by biomass, this has a direct impact on CO2 emission, but you still need to put some capex on the table. Even if the return is there, you still need to put the cash in advance. So of course, 2020, a lot of companies are preserving their cash to preserve their employment and their people. So maybe the capex for a cement plant does not hit the high priority this year. So delay 1 2 years, yeah, maybe, but I don't think more than that. I don't see why this crisis should delay much more than that.
Sunita, do you have something to add on this?
Yes, I do, and definitely I agree with what Magali has mentioned, and I liked the way you have put it, Magali, that the tsunami of climate change can't be, it has to be handled, right? And while we try to get back on tracks in terms of business terms, yes, investments are required whenever you want to put in technologies that will save your operations from fossil fuels or energy conservation. So whatever measures you have to take require investment, and that could be delayed, but are the efforts, they will pick up. In my view, they have to be picked up because we have our science-based targets, we have our carbon neutrality commitments, and there is a plan put in place, which I'm working on, to put out a carbon price so that we can sustain the efforts and the investments required. So pricing carbon becomes important business discussion, that this is how different business parts of the business can fund each other's carbon saving initiatives. So that's the way to go, I believe.
Thanks, Sunita. So staying on the investment side, so Vitali, what do we see in terms of investment in real estate? Are healthy and sustainable building getting a premium? Do you think that investors will focus more on investing in these properties? What is your view on this?
Yes, it is a very important question you are raising here, and we are all aware of the complexity to find rapid and efficient solutions. I liked what Magali said about the tsunami, but let's not forget the tsunami in between COVID and climate change. It's the economic crisis. And all these are problematics we have to deal with today, which makes our environment even more complicated, but it's great that we can gather and discuss these problems together. And I think this is the main point of our conversation, is to gather all experts in different fields, politicians, investors, end users, and so on, to find solutions, maybe start thinking on these solutions today, so that probably in 2 years we reach some kind of actions. So I would say waiting 2 years today is not appropriate. We should think and work already. So just to give you an example, the Swiss Sustainable Finance volume in Switzerland, it's in 2017, it's 390 billion Swiss francs. 22% of this amount is within the real estate industry. So it's 86 million or so already being invested. The financial markets are thinking of new instruments that will encourage investment into that direction. So it's already happening. It's very important. And in Switzerland, we are extremely cautious and aware of our environment and our well-being for now and the generations to come. So we have numerous technologies that are being developed in Switzerland in finding substitutions to energy-consuming habits that we had until now. We have a very high standard of education and very strong R&D specialists. So we all work on that, and even in the building industry, we have tax incentives for developments when you do more sustainable construction. We discuss these topics on a regular basis with politicians and so on. So it is a world that is changing, and let's hope that it will change in the right direction.
Thank you, Vitaly. And Antoine, what do you see from where you sit at BNP Paribas?
Well, we see that there's a lot of interest, obviously, to follow in the line of what was once pure greenwashing. Let's call it that way for what it was. Today, all the BREEAM, LEED, HQE certifications that are really starting to take shape and make sense on investments in real estate are now more than ever desirable for investors and users, tenants. On the other hand, we, as Vitaly said, we keep a close eye on technology for the future, what can make our buildings better. Again, no one has a crystal ball, but clearly will be all of us, I think, around the table funding R&D to answer these questions regarding the right balance between a healthy building and a sustainable building, which is not always the same thing. And air conditioning is a very interesting part of that because it's what's focusing a lot of attention right now. But if I tell you that there are 2 reasons for recycling air in a building, which is something people are standing against in the COVID times. They're afraid that the virus will cycle within the recycled air of your air conditioning. But if you don't recycle it, you're taking all of it from the outside, where it's more polluted than on the inside usually. So you're essentially polluting yourself with outside emissions. And you're pushing it high pressure through very dense filters. So your engines are running much stronger and you're using a lot more energy. So what would be the healthiest air conditioning system for an office building, which, I mean, opening windows is always going to be a topic and we need to go back to that for sure. But healthy doesn't always mean sustainable, and we really need the experts to gather around, do the R&D, and push us all in the right direction so that our investments are not made on a short-term way of thinking and really with a medium-term and long-term mindset, which takes into account all the aspects that are in real estate.
So an healthy building may even consume more energy and therefore be more costly. This is, yeah, it is indeed interesting. And also what we were discussing before is that it's the production of waste, right? There's a huge production of waste currently because of masks, because of wipes and all the hygienic measures that we have to take, which are indeed producing more disposable things. We'll have a discussion on this this afternoon. We'll have someone from Train Technology in our session at 4 p.m. So it will be interesting also to see the key takeaways from the session this afternoon on healthy building. But let's move to cities. So all this work from home and the fear of proximity, what does it mean? Which consequences will have on density in cities? Because density in cities is also an important element for minimizing pollution and minimizing CO2 emissions. And there has been studies that shown that density can increase creativity, innovation. So density is also important. What will we see? So this question it's for Ege and Pascal in the future. Will we see an exodus from cities because people will like, as Sunita was saying, will like to be close to nature, will be willing to have more space, or will we see a more local lifestyle coming in? So maybe Ege and then Pascal.
Well, we don't have a crystal ball, of course, but what we will see is, and what we already see is that a lot of people or cities are, of course, a lot of people are there, and people live and work in the cities. And what we did till now is, if we look at engineering and at the spatial quality of the cities, it was all engineered to give room for auto mobility. And what we see now is that people are rethinking about that, and we are making room for bicycles. Well, we are a Dutch country, so we are already working with bicycles. But what you see is that we are changing our minds in making space for also e-bikes, cargo bikes, and pedestrians within the city. So we are making more space for people to make livable areas. So having a lot of people in the city doesn't mean that we have to have or a lot of density and busy spaces in the cities. And we are also looking for more or better solutions to give space to all the bicycles that we have. If you look in the Netherlands, we have a solution, to give an example, like bicycle triangles. So we give more space for the bicyclists to start up in a different space and then scroll together later. So you get a kind of triangle which gives them more space. And what we'll see in the future is that we will see in the cities more flexible solutions, like using space for different activities on different parts of the days. So you will have more bicycles and pedestrians in the morning and terraces in the evening. So you have a multi-use of space. And if you look at if things move to the sides of the cities, I think you will see in the future more mobility hubs on the sides of the city. So you will have people come by car to the sides of the cities and get into other mobilities from there to go into the city, so you have more space. I think that will be more in the far future, but you will see a change over there. So you have also more sustainable and less pollution within the cities, and also less density there.
Pascal, do you want to add something? Thanks.
Yes, there was something that was very striking, I thought, in the media specifically, but also in some other circles in the first weeks in the crisis. It's like kind of the revenge of the countryside, you know, where everybody was saying, look how good it is in the countryside, and all these city people, you know, with their snobby attitudes, and they were saying how lovely it was to live in cities and how good, and now, you know, we are in a good place, the countryside. And you had this kind of mentality, apparently, to prove that the countryside was better than a city. And I don't believe in that. I would say not too fast on that. It's a little bit too easy, because if you watch from a sustainable point of view, suburbanization and it's very bad. I mean, the density in cities is very essential to keep our planet alive, and we should keep it. And we should be honest too, even before this COVID crisis, many European cities, and to some extent American cities, probably less Brazilian and Chinese cities, but in Europe specifically, all these cities were going back to the 19th century, which means giving less space to cars, giving much more space to pedestrians, much more space to cyclists, creating car-free zones. And I think this crisis has accelerated or validated or confirmed this movement that was already going on, that it is absolutely necessary for a good quality of life in cities, for good air quality in cities, that we have to redistribute the space, and all the space that has been given to the cars this last 100 years should be taken back and given back to the people. So the transformation of a city for cars to city for people, which is going on in many cities, will now accelerate. I think that a couple of European cities have taken this crisis to accelerate by making bike lanes, by making extra squares car free. And I think that's something that is essential. What we have to do is creating much more green space without cars, where people can meet on a good distance, where you can do activities. One of the things that we will do now in Brussels, for instance, is, since that the cultural institutions, theaters and things like that will still be closed or operating on very reduced numbers, well, let's get the artists out in public space. Let's perform in public space. It's something that is good. It's something that surprise people, which is also a very essential function of a city, to surprise people. Another thing I think that we will put, and other cities will do more, is when we are building towers and other buildings, that the rooftops of these buildings should become shared space, at least for the people living in the building, or for public when it's big enough. And I think that's the thing that we are putting from the city government point of view, that when new buildings are constructed, we have to make public space on the top of these buildings. So no longer putting all your technical stuff on the top of the building and no longer using your rooftop. No, we have to create extra space, whether shared, semi-public, completely public, or private, but extra space. So I think this crisis just has shown that the cities are not that, and that we should be all aware of not following this trap that some people want anxiously to create the end of the city and going back to city life, you know, because you're home with a garden. And you should never forget that for many people, the ultimate dream is a house with a garden and a fence around it. So there is some challenge going on. And I think, but once again, what I said in the beginning, people are going out again. People want to meet. People want to be on a terrace. They want to do cultural stuff. So I think the future will be in cities. And one closing remark, I think we should not go too fast with all these things. There's a tendency of thinking fast and want to change things. We don't know what the next normal will be. We have probably give it a little bit time. It's not the first time in the history of humanity that we are confronted with a kind of deadly virus. So it will happen again in the future. So maybe less. It's very, don't misunderstand me. It's very terrible things that are happening, but we should not proclaim the end of humanity neither. So, and the end of cities, we should not fall in that trap, I think.
Absolutely. So we have to be creative and leave cities for people. So I have a couple of question remarks. So from Madelex, how is this pandemic affecting the decisions of cities, whether to adopt urban sprawl or compact cities as a model of development? I don't know if Pascal, you've partially said it, but I don't know if you want to get this question.
Yeah, I think we will get our, we are working on it in Brussels to get our norms more strictly on the use of material. And every time when there is now a new investment, promotion or investment, the people who want to destroy a building or demolish a building have to prove that it's really necessary to demolish the building. It's not be taken recycled, and also the materials of buildings to recycle it. So that's the thing that's now going on in many cities, and we are doing it too.
Thanks, Pascal. I have a question for Magali from Cécile Ferraud. There is a growing understanding and desire to tackle the emissions linked to materials in the built environment from cities and from some government too. France, for example, is asking for public new build to have 50% timber or biosourced materials from 2023. How are materials manufacturers looking at this possible trend of decreased demand for the products?
So, you know, there's two parts of that question. I will answer, the first part is, you know, there's a lot of question at the moment, as we heard just earlier, on what the future of the construction, how much are we going to build in the near future? Are we going to try to maintain longer the buildings instead of building? But for the moment, the roadmap, when you look at IEA and this type of roadmap, what they are saying is that 2.2 billion of people are going to move to the cities in the next 30 years. 60% of that infrastructure is not built, and that's the equivalent of building Paris every week. So COVID might have an impact on it. I don't know yet. I don't think anybody knows, but there will still be a huge demand. So I personally think there is place for everybody. I don't think that there will never be enough wood to replace that. But more than that, for me, what is more important as a question is, who is the true lowest carbon emission? Because if you look at the total wood, we all know is for sure absorbing carbon, etc. But when you look at the full life cycle of what happened from, you know, cradle to grave, it's the concrete emits a lot at the moment of the production, but then it reabsorbs during the lifetime, and then you recycle it. The wood is the exact contrary. When you have to destroy a building at some stage, and wooden buildings don't last that long, there will be a moment there will be. If you burn it, there is a lot of CO2 that is being emitted. So I think that binary vision of one against the other is not making anybody progress. I think we need to look at it all together. There is a place for everybody, depending on which infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure will, in any way, you have no choice than to use materials like concrete, if I talk about bridges or dams or whatever. And there's really, we should all work together. I don't think, and there is absolutely plenty of place for everybody. And with a lot of increase of demand, except if things drastically change, which today is not proven yet.
Thanks, Magali. Last question, in the interest of time. So on workspaces, how do you foresee the adoption of co-working spaces moving forward? AK, so how do you see the future of co-working spaces? How do you see it at Arcadis?
Well, I think that that the future of working spaces will be that most of the working, like I said, the office buildings will be used for meeting places and gatherings around a specific subject, and the real working will be at home. At least that means for office buildings, because manufacturing buildings and workplaces will still be office places where things need to be done. But real office buildings will be used for getting together, meeting your colleagues, for the social aspects of things that needs to be done. And I think that will be the future, because we found out that all the digital working at home really is possible, and also gives us a lot of chances to do things at a different way, and also offers something to everyone, because it offers a purpose. It is easy to meet people, but I think the social aspects and the really meeting will still be something that we will use our office buildings for in the future.
So the task that can be done at home individually will be done at home, and then creativity working will be done together in the office. So thank you. Last questions for Sunita, Magali, and Antoine. So what do we ask to policymakers? We have touched up on here and there, but I want to hear from you. So starting from Sunita, we have 5 minutes. So if you can.
So I think from Indian perspective, I think the labor law relaxation won't work. So a real rethink on how we treat all different strata of people, and given that the informal economy runs a large part of is behind large part of our GDP, we will have to look for how we are looking at habitat for all. And if they are to work in cities, what should the habitation be for them? What should the work conditions be for them? Needs to be really thought through. So I think that's a huge shout out to the Indian government to relook at how the labor related aspects should be handled more stringently. So that needs a huge social amount of work. I think the labor community, even the maids and the drivers they're kind of invisible people, so they have to be really brought in to the inclusive community. They are the people who are the backbone, I would say. So a lot of rethinking needs to be done for these people, and given proper habitat for them, and that's very important from a city's perspective.
Thanks, Sunita.
I think legislation has to support low carbon. And what it means is they have to reward low carbon performance. And this is where, Vitaly talked earlier about tax incentive, but there is many other mechanisms such as CO2 pricing. Border protection, definitely, because if a country push very strongly their companies to go for low CO2, and low CO2, some of the mechanisms we are using are not so costly, but when we start talking about carbon capture, usage and storage, then we start entering very costly type of ground. And if you are not being rewarded somehow by your low carbon, if you continue to have to sell your concrete at the same price as someone who would not make that effort without any differentiation, then it will be hard for companies to survive. So rewarding CO2 performance is absolutely key.
Thank you, Magali. Antoine?
Pascal said earlier that we shouldn't react overly quickly, and we should consider the medium and long-term effect of what policymakers will be working on in the coming times. And I think that's very true on one point, which is labor laws and place of work. I think we gather together that work from home cannot be an imposed new normal for everyone. Employers need to offer the tool of an office building, and yes, I'm preaching for my business, but in fact it's true, it's a service and a tool. And if employers are tempted to not give that service or tool, they should, and I relate to what Sunita was saying, there should be regulation made and passed on what the conditions of work from home can be. Nobody should be forced to work from home if his home is not adapted to work from home. And so I think somewhere between labor laws and building regulations is what is correct, a correct way of policing work from home. It's going to be central to a medium and long-term approach to this question of health and safety on the place of work, and should we stay home more, commute less, and so on.
So employers should give the choice to employees, whether working from home
of course.
or the office. Okay, so we have only one last minute. I would like to ask to Pascal, to Vitaly, and to Eke a final key takeaway. What do we keep? What do we abandon after COVID-19? So maybe we can start from Pascal is on my left side. What do we
stop shaking hands and find another way of greeting everybody, because shaking hands is not only the COVID virus, it's also the flu virus. It's so many viruses that we are giving with that. So find another way to say hello to each other. And a hug is always better than a kiss. Not than a kiss, but than a hand. So I think maybe we agree. Let's change that. Yeah. I guess.
Vitaly.
Here we go. Yes, I like the discussion. I would like just to add that the workplace today will no longer be a single location, but an ecosystem of a variety of locations. So there are lots of trends that are coming on for years now, even before COVID. So we just have to be attentive and receive all the thoughts that we've been working on before COVID. It goes through general planning, it goes through mobility. There are lots of very interesting solutions that are being found by different governments all over Europe and the world. So I think we should be positive. We should go back to work and definitely watch out our self-hygiene, our relatives, and keep it safe.
And let's use less the car, no? Also.
Probably, if the the public transport allows you to be secure and comfortable, why not? Or bicycles.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I would say keep the positive impact that we have on sustainability and nature.
Thank you. So a massive thanks to the panelists. It was a great discussion. Thanks to the audience that have participated. So just as a note of closure, this is part of virtual event series. As Roland was saying, you will find the recording in our virtual event series webpage, and we have other built environment virtual events, one on the 29th on system decarbonization and one on the 1st of July on cities. So stay tuned. Thanks again and have a great day. Bye.